Hello, everyone. This is the International Transport Forum. This is the Ask the Author webinar. And my name is Michael Floth. I'm the head of communications. It's great to be here with you. Our topic today is how governments can bring low-emission trucks to our roads and do that fast rather than with a lot of time on their hands, because we don't have time. I'm with my colleague Matteo Craglia, who's the author of this report that we want to bring to you. It's a new format. We hope you like it. We have 10 minutes to take you through the substance. Matteo has 10 minutes, and then we'll open it up to questions from you, from the audience. This is about you. We want to give you the opportunity to quiz the author. I'm not going to say very much about the content to save us time, and Matteo knows about it, knows more about it anyway than I ever will, and that's the way it should be. So let me hand over to Andreas to take us through, to Matteo to take us through the findings of how governments can bring low emission trucks to a road and get from the about quarter of greenhouse gas emissions that they create to presumably and ideally zero. Matteo, over to you.
Thank you, Michael. Welcome. So I'll be walking you through the findings of this report. And this report investigates the various different technologies that can help us to decarbonize road freight, of which there are many. And it sets out a framework to help governments choose between them, decide which are the most promising and which deserve government policy support as well. Because there are a large number of different technologies, there is also a lot of technological uncertainty around these technologies. And that uncertainty can potentially lead to hesitancy and delay to quickly supporting new technologies. So it's really essential to overcome this uncertainty, and this framework that we'll set out today is intended to help policymakers be able to overcome that. Right. So governments need to play an active role in supporting low carbon technologies for road freight. Road freight accounts for a large share of transport emissions. And if we want to reach stated aims of decarbonizing the sector by 2050, reaching net zero policy goals, then to achieve that, we need to act very quickly. To decarbonize the sector by 2050 requires that by 2040, almost all new sales of trucks are either zero emission or can use zero emission fuels. So 10 years before, to allow for the vehicle fleets to turn over. To achieve that requires that sales of these technologies start this decade. And for that to happen, we need the infrastructure to help support their adoption already starting now. So to achieve these very short timescales requires government support. The question then is, how should governments support decarbonization technologies? And there are broadly, I guess, two schools of thought here. Firstly is focusing very much on technology neutrality, is trying as a government to treat all technologies equally, to not pick winners and allow the market to decide it on its own. And technology neutrality has certain positive benefits, and it's particularly useful for performance-based targets. Things like vehicle CO2 emission standards, which set a carbon intensity that vehicle manufacturers have to meet. It's very useful to allow vehicle manufacturers to do that in the way that they see fit, and to therefore not, as a government, pick any technologies on that. However, technology neutrality on its own has its limitations. And for this, an alternative approach, known more as the decide and provide paradigm, can be particularly useful and should be, we think, used. And with this type of paradigm, governments prioritize promising technologies over others. They choose technologies that show particular promise and can help to achieve these policy goals quickly. And this is particularly useful when it comes to government providing financial support to stimulate the market, guiding the market and ensuring coordination between stakeholders, things like vehicle purchase subsidies, and crucially, when it comes to supporting infrastructure development, when governments have to help overcome those market risks, prioritizing only promising solutions is essential to help accelerate at the pace we need to meet our net zero policy goals. The next question is, if governments are to prioritize certain technologies, how should they do so? So in this report, we set out a framework that in particular focuses on likelihoods. We think that focusing on likelihoods within these decisions is particularly important. So in this report, we set out ways to define these likelihoods for different technologies. So ways to evaluate which are more promising and likely technologies. And then based on those, how should governments act? When should they act? So if I focus on the first of how to define the likelihoods of a technology meeting our decarbonization goals in road freight, we think broadly that there are four major criteria that should be used to define this likelihood of a technology decarbonizing road freight. And these are the maturity of the technology. How many pilot tests has it been through? How close is it to commercial deployment? Secondly, the potential for the technology to be cost competitive in the long term without long-term subsidies or policy support. Thirdly is the potential for the technology to be sustainable in the long term and low carbon for the mass market. And finally, how quickly can it be deployed? And technologies vary in these four factors. So if I walk you through them relatively quickly, there are a large number of different technologies that can decarbonize road freight, and they're shown here on this slide. So these include battery electric vehicles with stationary charging, then other alternative battery electric vehicles such as battery swapping that we're seeing happening now quite a lot in China, catenary and electric road system solutions. And then there's also other technologies such as hydrogen, biofuels, and e-fuels. And each of these technologies vary considerably in their technological maturity today. There are some technologies such as battery electric vehicles and also biodiesel that is already under commercial development, while as others that will take a significant number of years to reach commercial deployment. The second way of evaluating them is then based on how cost competitive they can be in the long term. And here we see in particular that electrified options are likely to have a high likelihood of being cost competitive in the long term. This is principally due to their high inherent energy efficiency. Other technologies, also from past ITF reports, we've also evaluated these, and we think that there are particular challenges for other technologies such as hydrogen or e-fuels to be cost competitive in the long term. Finally, then, looking at how low carbon and sustainable they can be. Again, electrified options are likely to have a benefit on this because of their energy efficiencies. And last but not least is how quickly can they be deployed. So part of this is how quickly are they already under commercial development, but then also in the long term, will the market absorb it and stimulate it quickly if they're cost competitive? And again, the conclusion here is that currently we see that battery electric vehicles, particularly for short-haul applications, have the greatest likelihood of all of these road freight technologies to meet decarbonization goals. They should arguably therefore be prioritized within policymaking. So this is the steps to sort of define the likelihood of each of these technologies meeting policy goals. The next question is, how should governments go about using this knowledge? How should they act upon that? Technologies may have different likelihoods, but based on that, which should then be prioritized and when? So in the second part of the framework, we focus on how to go about this. And there are 5 key points here, which I'll walk you through now. And all of these points are defining when to act to prioritize a certain solution. So the first factor to consider here is, will the potential of these emerging technologies change relative to each other? So if we see that one technology is already far more likely than the others, is already quite a bit ahead of other technologies, the question is sort of, will other technologies be able to catch up? Is their likelihood going to change in the near future that it's worth at least waiting and postponing decisions to see if they could also be a contender? If one technology is already far ahead, arguably we should just go with that single technology and make the most of it, because the others will not be able to catch up in time. Here, in particular, for battery electric vehicles, we see that they are already quite far ahead in terms of market deployment and in terms of their likelihood of success. And whereas other technologies are, the likelihood of other technologies is unlikely to change in the next 5 to 10 years. Why? Because crucially, other technologies such as e-fuels, such as mass widespread hydrogen truck deployment, is unlikely to happen in the next 5 years. Therefore, they are unlikely to become much more promising in the next few years. So this was one first factor of deciding when to act. The second one is, how big is the risk of choosing an uncompetitive technology and perhaps ending up with underused or stranded assets? So here in particular, technologies that can make most use of existing infrastructure are likely to have an advantage. For example, here with battery electric vehicles and other electrified options can make use of the existing electricity grid, which can move energy from one part of the country to another. Other solutions such as hydrogen, this infrastructure to move hydrogen from one part of the country to another does not yet exist and would have to be built. The second part, I guess, associated with this is that battery electric vehicles can harness the parallel deployment of electric passenger cars. We don't currently see many of the other technologies also being used within the passenger car segment. And this means that for other technologies, much of the infrastructure could not be as highly utilized. And if it's not highly utilized, then it's potentially not going to be commercially viable. So this is, again, another factor to consider of when and which technologies should we prioritize. The third one is, how much will scaling up these low carbon solutions cost? What is the overall capital expenditure upfront that a government would have to put into it? If it's a large amount of money, understandably, a government has to think about doing full proper studies to understand, is this money well spent? What are the risks that are involved in it? And here again, we see quite a few differences between the technologies. Battery electric vehicles can arguably be relatively incremental, starting with short-haul applications in urban settings with a reliance on depot charging, and then incrementally building up the public charging network from there. Other technologies, such as electric road systems or hydrogen refueling, will require a very large capital expenditure upfront to be able to convince consumers to be able to purchase these vehicles. So there'll be a large investments that will be needed upfront. Fourth point is then, road freight is an inherently international sector. So it's very important to coordinate with nearby governments and markets to ensure that you're aligned. There's no point picking one technology if your neighboring country is going to choose another. Here we're seeing quite a lot of alignments within Europe, China, and North America towards backbone strengthened by electric technologies, perhaps with some other complementary technologies such as hydrogen as well. And finally, how much time is left to make a decision? If we have lots of time, arguably we should sort of sit back and wait and see what the market decides. The problem with this is that we don't have that time. We don't have that luxury of time. And so have to make a decision on technologies that we have today that can be scaled quickly today, and battery electric vehicles are particularly well suited to this. I guess to cement this point, as part of this study, we also looked into current diesel vehicles emit emissions, which obviously cause economic costs, climate costs to the environment. And if we delayed the adoption of zero-emission vehicles by just 2 years, then these continuing environmental costs would cost a similar amount to building all of the required infrastructure for electric vehicles. I'll say that again just to hammer that home. Delaying the adoption of zero-emission vehicles by 2 years would cost the same in environmental damages as building all of the required charging infrastructure. So we really don't have the luxury of time, and we have to act with technologies that we have available today. So I guess finally, to conclude, we can't allow this technological uncertainty to delay action. So hopefully answering these types of questions can help governments to overcome this hesitancy that potentially they may have on overcoming this uncertainty that's involved. And governments have to decide and provide and support only a limited number of promising technologies to help guide the market and accelerate the adoption. Support for battery electric vehicles, we think, is a low regret policy, as is charging infrastructure, in particular, focusing on depot charging and strengthening the grids near areas of high transport flows is also a low regret policy and should be pursued as quickly as possible. Thank you very much. Michael, we can't hear you. I'm afraid you're muted.
I'm very sorry. I was thanking you for this very, very good presentation that was worth every second, even though it was slightly longer than 10 minutes. We'll hurry up with the questions. It's your turn out there, our audience, wherever you are in the world and whatever your time zone is. Please use the Q&A. That's where I'll pick this up and I'll pass them on to Matteo. That allows me to kind of amalgamate questions if they're in the same vein and use our time most efficiently. The first question I have here is from Pauline Oriot, who asks about something you then touched upon, namely sort of neighboring countries issues and aligning. How would you tackle the risk of picking technology that differs from the one across the border? And maybe if I can add that, can you give some concrete examples where there is alignment or where actually the opposite is happening, where neighboring countries have picked different technologies?
It's a very good question. And I think here the European Union is actually playing a key, interesting role of helping to coordinate between different member states on which technologies and aligning the levels of ambition and the targets. That said, within that, the levels of support obviously differ between these member countries. Certain countries are able to offer a lot more financial support than others, but ensuring that there is that coordination is essential to make sure that we're focusing on similar technologies. As I said, so this is happening a lot in Europe. From what we've heard from many other member countries of ITF, that could still be improved in other areas, in other countries, is not only between different countries, but also then between different states and different regions within the countries, is ensuring that there's that collaboration on that front as well. In terms of what's examples of countries that have taken different approaches, I think we're still the relatively early stage of choosing technologies. We're seeing now coalescing around battery electric vehicles. There's still some countries that are pursuing hydrogen as quite a lot. We'll see how that changes in the near future. And I guess there have been quite a lot of pilot studies, particularly on other technologies such as electric road systems in Germany and Sweden, that are potentially still technologies to keep on the table, but don't are unlikely to be deployed very quickly at the moment, but may be needed as a complementary solution in the long term.
Thanks. While I'm waiting for more questions to pop up, one follow-up questions on countries and how they kind of behave looking at each other. I like your picture with the kind of cheating guy. Are there countries that are actually moving to that kind of approach that you mentioned, the likelihood, assessing the likelihood and using this kind of approach? And moving from a technology neutral approach to a decide and provide, or is that a bit of a foggy area? We're not really clear what countries are going for.
I think it's a good question, because in particular, from a policymaker approach, there's always that balancing act between intervening now with a specific technology, and there will always be scientific uncertainty about the promise of a technology, versus waiting to find out more of, we will be more sure in 2 years, so we should wait and decide then. And so I think having this type of framework of understanding how to evaluate the likelihoods of technologies and crucially when to act based on that we don't have very much time, is essential and can give policymakers confidence to prioritize a certain solution and not be accused of picking winners. And with this, within the report, we also touch on one interesting example. Is Germany did this a few years ago, was they acknowledged that there was uncertainty which would be the most promising technology. They focused in particular on battery electric vehicles, hydrogen vehicles, and overhead catenary electric road systems. But they publicly communicated about this uncertainty and set out timeframes of when they would make a decision based on that. That they would, I think broadly in this figure, the green timelines are sort of a testing phase, and that they would make a decision on which of these technologies to prioritize by 2024, 2026, I think. I think stating this is a way of helping to communicate about uncertainty and how governments are going about making these choices is one example of an interesting way of going about it.
Structuring uncertainty. Thanks very much. 3 more questions. We have a little under 10 minutes. I'll pose them one by one. Maybe if you can try and give short answers so we can cover them all. The first one comes from Yoshinobu Mizukami, who asks, do electric trucks really have a low environmental impact when considering the weight of batteries and the disposal of the battery? Isn't it possible that trolley lines, so electric road systems on highways, are more environmentally friendly and conservative in a good sense?
It's a good question. So for that, we have studied the life cycle impacts of electric vehicles and compared them with other technologies. We haven't compared electric road systems, but we did that in our Cleaner Vehicles report, which I'd direct you to. And we find that electric vehicles are already globally, on average, using globally average electricity carbon intensity, 40% better than diesel vehicles, and that's likely to only improve as electricity decarbonizes. Obviously, there are still going to be some life cycle impacts. One challenge is that we can't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. If there are already some benefits, we have to just go with what we can. And electric options are particularly well suited here. Electric road systems potentially could have a slightly smaller battery, and so could have lower embodied costs there. There will be some slight additional costs from having the overhead wire infrastructure, which would also have some embedded emissions. But broadly, all of these electric options are likely to deliver very significant carbon intensity improvements over our existing technologies today.
You touched a little bit on the question there that I was going to put to you from Arjan van Vliet, who asked exactly about the cost side. Namely, the cost for battery electric trucks are still high compared to diesel trucks. It's from an operator point of view. So couldn't electric road systems, for example, speed up the rollout, particularly for small and medium enterprises who don't have that much capital maybe to buy, hugely expensive battery electric trucks, but could afford trucks that have a pantograph on top and a smaller battery. So is that maybe worth considering in that assessment?
So in general, I think electric road systems are perhaps worth keeping as a long-term technology if we see that there are fundamental limitations to the technologies we have today. But we also can't kid ourselves that this is going to be a very quick adoption of electric road systems either. I think today it's important to prioritize what is already commercially available. And of all of these technologies, which are the ones that actually deliver carbon intensity improvements today and are actually being commercially deployed, is battery electric vehicles, particularly in short haul applications. I think focusing on this short haul as quickly as possible, understanding what are the limitations from there, and then seeing are there complementary roles to be played by other technologies, such as electric road systems or hydrogen vehicles in the long term to decarbonize the sector is the way to go about this. But in the short term, we have to focus on understanding these lessons today. You're right, obviously, that currently battery electric vehicles are relatively expensive. We expect that to change in the very near future. I would point you to a report we did last year on understanding the uncertainties involved with these different technologies. And we see that battery electric vehicles, particularly for short haul applications, which are around here, will become cost competitive on a total cost of ownership perspective this decade, already without financial support. Having additional financial support can accelerate those timelines and make it faster and reduce the uncertainty that's involved.
Thank you very much. I see no further questions. If anyone has one, please launch it now. I will launch a short poll, which I usually do with 3 questions this time, not 2, as most of you used to have been to Ask the Authors, just for us to understand a little bit whether this is a useful format for you and also whether you like our new report. So don't be surprised if something pops up on your window. If you have a second, answer these 3 questions. It'll just help us to get better. And here come more questions. From Patrick Ackermann, actually, who asks about the deployment. He asks, how do you judge fast deployment? Is this only about quickly getting an initial network in place, or is it about putting sufficient infrastructure into place to provide energy also? Some technologies can start faster, but be slower to reach full potential. How does that figure in your framework?
So it's a good point that I guess it includes a lot of this. So it includes the time setting up the infrastructure. And here, all of these technologies will require a fair amount of time to build the infrastructure that's involved. Perhaps short haul applications for trucks, things can be done relatively quickly, particularly because things like grid reinforcements would not be as necessary. But as you move towards higher and higher power, more and more grid infrastructure investments will be needed, and that has a certain time frame that's involved in it. Similarly, for electric road systems, we'll have similar timeframes involved. So broadly, how do we judge these timeframes? Partly is the time required to build the infrastructure, and there, as we mentioned, large differences between the technologies. The electric options can already build off existing infrastructure of the grid. Things like hydrogen infrastructure does not broadly exist yet. But the second part around the timescales that are involved is also how quickly can they become cost competitive, and how quickly, therefore, will the market deploy these technologies. And again, here again is sort of the long-term cost competitiveness of these technologies is then particularly important with that. And finally is then what is the broad industry consensus? Are there already industrial players that are actively pushing for this from a broad set of stakeholders? We're seeing this for certain technologies, perhaps less so for other technologies that are likely to take a little longer.
Okay, thank you very much. And we're stopping on the hour. It's 4 p.m. here in Paris. 30 minutes, that's what we allot ourselves. We cannot cover everything here, that's normal. We want to give you a taste and give you an opportunity to ask questions, to learn about what's in these reports. I've just posted the link again if you want to read it. Please let us know what you think of it. There's actually, on the last page of the inside cover is a survey that tells us a little bit whether our products are the right ones. This is the first report in a new format that we're introducing, which is a little bit more visual, a little more lighter, hopefully easier to read, hopefully even better structured. So we're really keen to know whether you like that or you find that not so great, so that we know which direction to go. Thank you all for your time. I will send you the video recording link of this Ask the Author in case you want to watch it again because it was so great, or share it with colleagues, friends, people who are interested. And please do reach out to us if you have questions. This is an attempt to engage with you, to give you the opportunity to, talk to people like Matteo who know everything about electric trucks and decarbonization of heavy road vehicles. And get a conversation going with those of you who are active in the transport sector and policy making in different areas that are relevant for this. So thank you again very much. Thank you very much, Matteo, for your time and for preparing this excellent presentation. Again, I loved your slides, the horses in particular. That was my favorite. And I hope to see you all again in another Ask the Author. We have quite a few coming up in the next few weeks and a couple of months. So there'll be other opportunities, and we hope to see you again. Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Have a very good day and see you soon.